Two things. Have you heard of the Cloud Rider motif?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Oh, the Cloud Rider motif.
Yeah. Okay. Then I'm assuming you've heard of like the two powers in heaven motif.
No.
Okay. There's a Jewish historian named Alan Segal. He wrote a book called The Two Powers in Heaven. And what he talks about is there's this weird thing happening in the Hebrew Bible where there's almost like two Yahweh figures that they point to. So some verses, for instance, will say like Yahweh rained down fire from Yahweh. And so Philo of Alexandria in the Second Temple period talks about this two powers in heaven motif. And he says like there's two Yahwehs. There's the first power and the second power, but they're both Yahweh. It's almost like a sort of proto-Trinitarian view. That's one thing that I'll just kind of put there for now. Another puzzle piece here is you've heard about the Cloud Rider motif. So in the Ugaritic texts, in the Baal cycle, we see Baal referenced as the one who rides the clouds. And I think you can see that actually adopted by the Israelites in the Hebrew Bible as well. So Psalm 104 is like an exaltation psalm and actually talks about Yahweh being the one that rides the clouds in heaven. He is the king. I see that as kind of a polemic of calling Yahweh the king over Baal. Are we on the same page there?
Sure.
Okay. Into Daniel 7, you'll see a messianic passage there about how God will come down, and you'll see the Son of Man come, riding in the clouds of heaven, and his kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom.
Do you think Daniel thought that the Son of Man was going to be God, since he says that he's riding on a cloud?
This is a really interesting point.
I don't think that he did, because he was a Jewish writer.
I lean on saying yes, but I don't know if I can say
Do you
that with
think
like absolute certainty.
The
Is that
prophet
fair?
Daniel was expecting the Messiah to be God.
I think so.
Or, sorry,
but
the Son of Man to be God.
who is that's a motif only applied to God. So you have this cloud rider motif and
So
the human
by the
one.
way, I do think that there are multiple things which people, even in Jesus' time, thought only God could do. Things like forgiving sins. And when Jesus
Yeah.
does these things, he's not doing so in order to prove that he's God, but in order to prove that the Son of Man has the authority
Yeah,
to
I
do that
completely
too.
agree. I completely agree. This isn't that kind of an argument. This is an identification.
Wait. So he's agreeing that not only God can forgive sin, is it? The way that just what just happened? Because some Christian did comment in my comment section and using that line of argument, right? If only God can forgive sin, and then it goes on from there. So is what he's saying someone that Christian accept? Not someone. Something that Christian accept, that what Jesus is doing is not really to claim that he's doing only God can do, but it's the other way around.
Thing.
So where's Jesus claiming to
Yes,
be God?
that's where I'm going. So we have these puzzle pieces in place.
Sure.
If you fast forward to Mark's gospel,
Yeah, with regards to puzzle piece, right? So I think Christian cannot run away from the fact that to answer this question, even if you really believe that, yeah, the conclusion is indeed Jesus did claim to be God, but to get to there, it's like a massive, complicated puzzle that you have to solve. It's not like, I'm not sure. I hope you realize this, that why it's so difficult for others is because why is it so layered upon hints and puzzle and whatever, and it's not clear cut. Even if that is the case, even if you are true, meaning even if, right, you are true that the conclusion is valid, but you have to go through this layer of complicated puzzle. Why would that be the case? Why would God do that?
I'm going to use Mark.
Let's do Mark.
Jesus before Caiaphas in Mark's gospel, Caiaphas asks him, "Who are you?" And instead of just explicitly saying, "I am God," Jesus quotes Daniel 7, saying he is the Son of Man, the human one,
Yep.
who will ride on the clouds, and calls himself the second power. So you have this two powers in heaven motif. The two powers, they're both God, and the cloud rider motif, and the Son of Man. He's quoting Daniel 7 to identify himself. After that, Caiaphas tears his robe and cries
Yes.
blasphemy.
I do think that Jesus is making some pretty extraordinary claims to himself, such as being the Son of Man, but I still don't see why he's claiming to be God. If this were the way that he was trying to reveal his divinity to people, it'd be a strange and convoluted way to do it. Psalm 82 also talks about God presiding over a council
Yeah.
of gods, saying,
So
"You shall be called
I
gods."
think there's a mistake here,
And
'cause-
Jesus quotes that psalm when he's referring to his relationship with the Father
I understand what you're
in the
saying.
Gospel of
The
John.
issue is-
So even if in the Old Testament you have
have
these
two
sort of
hypotheses,
lesser
though,
gods,
right?
Jesus is
Your
only claiming to be that.
hypothesis, right? That this is not a Christological implication, and I have mine. And I get what you're saying, where you're coming from, but to the ancient author, how obvious would this be?
So the best we have here is Jesus claiming to be the Son of Man, and that might indicate that he might be God.
Yeah, but we don't predicate our hypotheses on the evidence we wish we did have. We go off the evidence that we do have.
That's right, and I don't think that there's any point at which Jesus says,
So you're saying
"I am
that
God."
this is not
All right,
evidence?
guys, that's time.
Evidence, but not good enough. Hey, so nice to meet you. Sorry we haven't got more time. I wish we could. This chap over here just seems also very knowledgeable, very enthusiastic and philosophically minded as well. Why don't we bring you back?
So, my claim, which might bother some people in this circle, and this is why I thought maybe we could find a little bit of middle
That's how
ground
we
here.
like it.
Because I represent a form of Christianity that a lot of people don't even consider as Christian.
Uh-huh.
I'm a Latter-day Saint, also
Aha!
known as a Mormon.
Awesome.
And my claim is that the restored gospel, also known as Mormonism, provides a conception of God that is more rationally defensible than any other creedal Christian sect.
Okay. Oh, tell me why. I must admit, I don't know very much about Mormon theology. I know you
So-
also don't like being called Mormons, right? So I don't quite know what terms
Yeah,
you
we,
use.
we generally are known.
Latter-day Saints.
Latter-day Saints, the church, a member of the Church
LDS
of
theology,
Jesus
let's
Christ.
say.
Yes. Our theological claims, for example, the problem of evil.
Evil.
Okay, so the way that we address it. So the problem really, so far as I can tell, that you have isn't so much with suffering, right? Because suffering could be something that is justifiable, right?
Yeah, in principle, it's sort of the amount of suffering, the depth of suffering.
Absolutely. So the issue really is injustice. It's
It's not injustice. It's suffering, and particularly suffering of non-human animals.
Okay, and fair enough. So with the concept of injustice, the Latter-day Saint conception of God is that God actually, his purpose is to make us become as he is.
Yes. Does that include animals as well?
Animals are part of the created order that will be redeemed along with the rest of the created order.
Okay, so what does suffering do for them?
Suffering is part of the inherent nature of the world as a fallen world, okay?
Even for animals?
Yes, even for animals.
Whose fault is that?
Let me break
Sorry,
it down.
I'm throwing
this
a lot
way.
of questions.
Yeah, let me break it down like this.
Sure.
So if I have a child
Yeah.
and I want my child to grow up to become like me, my child needs to go out of my house.
Yep.
He needs to go into the lone and dreary world. And if that is the case, that means that there's going to be some level of separation between me and him. He's in the world of injustice. It's a world that is unfair.
Why is that world unjust and unfair? Because I understand what you're saying. In this analogy, you want your child to become like you. And what that's going to involve is encountering suffering, developing as a person, getting thicker skin. But the only reason that you want that for your child is because they're going to live in a world where they're going to have to encounter that, and you want them to be better at dealing with that, right? If you were given the opportunity to give your child a life that was separate from you, where they went about and did their business, but there wasn't that kind of suffering, and you chose the one in which there was suffering just for the sake of it, I think that would be problematic.
Well, it's not that I chose to put them in that world. See, this is a difference in Latter-day Saint theology.
Sure, that's what I'm interested in.
In Latter-day Saint theology, there is a pre-existence, and human beings, knowing the unjust nature of reality, have the choice.
Oh, they choose to,
They
yes.
choose to enter into the mortal state,
Sure.
to pass through. The way to look at it is there's this realm of injustice where anything can happen. I can go out tomorrow, my kid can get cancer, all these things can happen. And the idea is we say, but if you're willing to pass through the realm of injustice, this is a necessary condition to reach your divine potential.
How come? Why is it necessary?
This is another thing about Latter-day Saint theology that's different. Like, for instance, God cannot create a square circle.
Why does that apply here? I mean, why can't he do that?
Because God cannot bring you to your divine potential because of the nature of the laws of reality.
Okay, but like, why not? Because you're just sort of restating that he can't do it. I want to know why.
I know what I'm saying is that there are laws that even God is bound by.
Like, which laws are relevant here? Like, which laws is
Like the law of
God-
non-contradiction,
But
for instance.
explain to me how the law of non-contradiction binds God to not create a world where there's no suffering.
Because that relationship with God must be freely chosen, and God cannot force me. Because there is the question, why doesn't God just make us all
Okay,
happy
but that's
all
a
the time
separate question,
forever?
because God could make a world in which there's no suffering, in which you're still
I disagree.
in which you're still free to choose whether or not to follow him.
I would say that that is a logical contradiction.
Okay, so maybe you can tell me why. Because right now what you're telling me is that it's illogical on the level of creating a square circle to create a system that a person can voluntarily choose to sort of exit the heavenly realm and go into in order to do whatever they need to do to get to God's ultimate
Not to
potential.
get
for
to
them.
God, to become as he is.
Sure, to fulfill their full potential that has to involve not just suffering, but the
Injustice.
kind of suffering that we see on planet Earth.
I'm
asking why that's logically necessary.
A totally unjust world,
Mm-hmm.
okay? Because it is by passing through this realm that we have the experience of injustice that allows us to know what injustice is.
But why do we need to know what injustice is?
Because how else can you come to be like God? Kind of like the Adam and Eve story. There's the fruit of the tree of knowledge and good and evil.
So what is justice? How do you define justice?
Off the top of my head, I would say that justice is getting what you deserve.
Yeah, right. Okay. And so the problem is that, like, you can imagine a situation in which there was nothing wrong, nothing bad, nothing evil, and therefore no need for this rectifying force of justice. It's a little.
No.
We say justice is a good thing, but justice is a good thing insofar.
Can you know-
Hold on. Justice is a good thing insofar as it overcomes injustice. That's what it's there for. In the same way that chemotherapy is a good thing because it tries to overcome cancer. If I said that I was going to create cancer so that we could have the good of chemotherapy, and you said, why would you do that? And I said, because there's no way for us to
No,
achieve the
it's-
good of chemotherapy without creating cancer, you'd look at me like I'd lost my mind.
No, it's like saying, this is the better analogy. It's like saying to my son, the only way that you can become the way I am is to go out into that world where anything could happen and to persevere.
Okay, I still have a qualm with this, but for the sake of time, I want to ask you about animals. Do animals consent to go into this?
The animal kingdom is part of the fallen world. They are part of the fallen order.
Do they feel pain?
I don't know. That's more of a good question. I don't know necessarily where
What's
they
your
fit within
confidence
the-
level? Like, if I started strangling a dog in front of you, would you stop me?
Yeah, I think that I have an obligation to prevent the death of living creatures.
Not death. No, I'm not going to kill it. I'm going to
Well,
sort
even to
of
prevent the
Deadpool
suffering
style
of
keep
an
it
animal.
alive just
Yeah.
so it can suffer more.
Yeah,
Will
sure.
you stop me from doing that?
Yeah,
Right, why?
because I believe that God wants us to protect the created order.
Okay, so
and to
it's-
create goodness, light, and truth.
So
in
would
the
that be
world.
similar to, like, you know, me stepping on a plant or something? You're just like, hey, don't do that, man. It's the created
No,
order.
you could
Or do you
say
think
that-
it's because they're suffering?
Yeah, I think it is probably because they're suffering, but I don't understand that suffering in terms of the way that humans suffer.
Okay, because you said that the reason why it's not so much of a problem for humans to enter the Vale of Tears and have to suffer is because they consent to do so before they're born. If animals don't do that, then I don't think that their suffering is justified on the same grounds.
Well, let me turn this around, because while I think that you bring up some objections there, my claim is that we have a better capacity to handle this than the creedal Christian model.
Sure. Okay. So,
And so would you agree with my claim that we have a better model than creedal Christianity?
I don't know, because I don't know enough, because we've only been speaking for 10 minutes. There are probably things that it deals with better and things that it deals with worse. For example, you know, I've spoken a ton on my show about the Gnostic cosmology, which I think does a lot to do away with problems like the problem of evil and the weird sort of seeming immateriality of Jesus in some passages and stuff. But there's a lot of problems with it too. There's a ton of problems, such as like
Yeah.
God's providence and the nature of why the demiurge is created. All of these ideas are oftentimes, I think, created because they better account for certain things over others. Don't think that's necessarily the case with Mormonism, of course. But yeah, I'm sure in some cases it does better, in some cases it does worse. In this case, I don't think it does anything more to explain the suffering of animals.
Your problem with the suffering of animals is that it's unjust.
No, it's not.
Then
It's
why do
not.
you? What suffering?
It's that
If
it's that-
suffering, if suffering ultimately is redeemed, let's say the animals on the other side, for all they suffer, they get the best possible animal future that you could ever imagine,
Why-
and the animals
yeah.
get there and they go, "This is great. It was all worth it."
Yeah, then the question is
then
why-
it would be worth
then
it.
the
So
question
it's
is-
the
then question
injustice
is-
of
The
it.
question is, why aren't they just given that without the suffering first? I can understand why that wouldn't happen with humans for whatever. Again, I want to clarify, I still have qualms with your idea, but let me just grant it for a moment. I can understand why you need to do that with humans before they get the nice reward at the end. But why the animals? Why cause them to suffer?
Human beings will suffer as well unjustly. It's
I'm not
just the
talking about
nature of
justice.
an unjust
The
world.
suffering of animals, I think, is unexpected if a good God is overseeing.
But it's not a
the world.
problem if ultimately they are compensated
Well,
for
I think
it.
it still is a problem because you don't just get to inflict suffering and then compensate people and think that that's okay. Have you heard of the Bullingdon Club? It's a club.
No, if I
Hold
have
on,
to inflict
hold on.
suffering on here,
Wait a
let's-
second. Let me
let's take a dog.
give you this example. Let me give you this example. There's an infamous club, a private members club at Oxford University called the Bullingdon Club. They're a bunch of like Etonites, posh kids who used to go around. They'd go to restaurants. They were incredibly rich. They would host a dinner and then they would trash the place. They'd flip over tables. They'd smash things. They'd cover the walls and everything. It was absolutely devastating, just horrible behavior. And then when the owner came up and said, "What the hell have you done?" They just paid them off. They said, "Hey, have a bunch of money." And not only that, they paid them way more than the repairs are worth. So they could get away with it because if anything, they've done those people a favor. No, it's still terrible, awful behavior because even if you've compensated someone for it, if you've caused them for suffering, which by the way,
It
still hasn't
depends-
been
it depends-
explained
real quick, I got
why that
30
suffering
seconds. I got
exists.
30 seconds. Let me-
It doesn't seem like it's worth it.
Let me do this.
Or if it's not worth it, it doesn't
yes,
seem like it's
It
justifiable.
can be worth it though. For instance, a dog that's getting a shot has no idea what's going on. He's just thinking, "This hurts and is so terrible." And the thing is if it ultimately saves its life, it's worth it.
Yeah, but imagine
so
if you had
there
the
is a
opportu-
compensatory reward for the suffering that's there, everything can be redeemed.
understand
and
what
in
you're
your
saying.
view, is life even worth it? Because if life is mostly suffering, even for the animals, then isn't the logical conclusion to end this project altogether?
That's a separate question. But if you had the opportunity to not have that dog need the shot and you gave them the shot anyway. You created the need for the shot, and then gave them the shot and caused them to suffer.
But in
you didn't need to
LDS
give them the need for it in the first
cosmology,
place.
That would be
wrong.
God does not create the conditions that are where the shot is necessary.
That's
You're
what we need to
correct,
explore.
and you're correct on creedal Christianity. It does, and that's the biggest flaw with it. By the way, I want to give you. That's just. Oh, hey,
thanks.
Alex. It's been great to meet you, man.
Okay, to the last part, the discussion is totally about suffering, right? Especially suffering about animals. That's interesting as a, as a thought process. What would be the explanation for that? Anyway, so we have covered 3 parts where none of the many, of course I'm not sure how the people in the group is selected, because some, for example, one of the women doesn't seem to have the ability to present a strong case. Anyway, it's just purely I feel this way, I just want you to something like that, right? Anyway, this has been interesting 3-part of a video. Hopefully I'll be having this kind of discussion. I do enjoy this, and interestingly enough, those who can go in terms of intellectual discussion is, in certain topic and discussing precisely the fundamentals, etc., tend to be from those who are free thinker, atheistic worldview. Yeah, thank you for watching. See you next time.